How's it going, everybody? It's your boy Flobo. This is Wassup, Flobo? Episode number 63. Rocking and rolling Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays for the foreseeable future. You get to hear a little bit of me and how, I don't know why I did that. I'm sober, I swear. About things going on in my life, things I've seen, things I've done, all that stuff in between. Thank you so much for listening. For those of you who are wondering, inquiring, I have not done my daily run yet. I'm about to go after this, but I figure if I can just procrastinate my run by doing this, I can knock two birds out with one stone. It's Wednesday. It's the end of April. How's everyone doing? Probably hitting your first of the month during lockdown. Just want to say that whatever your situation is, I understand. I hear you, and I feel you. As for me, last night I had a double feature as far as Zoom calls. Like I was on this call for this retrospective of the Monday Night War. I'm not sure when it's coming out. The podcast is called Dropping That Culture. If you guys check that out, it's called Dropping That Culture with AJ and Belzer. Make sure you check that out. And if you, I don't know if you'd stream it or download it. I don't know where it's going to be. They asked me to be on it because like, hey, you're a wrestling guy. And I was like, okay, yeah. And then I did a game night over a Zoom call, which I can't lie. I had my questions about. It was kind of complicated in the email. I was wondering if I should just bail, but I didn't. But it was amazing. A lot of fun playing on game night, met new friends and new people. So that was pretty cool. But today's episode comes from something I read on the Twitter this morning. I think it was Forbes or Investor Business Daily. I think it's Forbes. Basically saying this, during the quarantine, the self-quarantine or lockdown, depending on what your community is doing, podcast habits have changed. See, we're not commuting as much, we're not driving our cars as much, and so our listening habits are really more like the weekends. We get up, we make a meal, we do other things, and if you have 20 minutes, 30 minutes on the porch, assuming you have one, you'll check out a podcast as opposed to getting up and going, all right, I'll listen to a whole show on my way to work or a whole show on my way back from work. And our listening habits have pretty much shifted, which is true. Because I remember when I had a job that was 60 miles away each way, I used to bang out like 3 podcasts a day, And it begs the question, if there's content still pumping out, because if you make a podcast for revenue, which I technically do on my podcast is New Amsterdam Radio. I technically do it for revenue, but I've made so little, I don't think of it as revenue. I think I made like $3 the entire time I had that podcast. But if you're making podcasts for revenue, most people can't stop because that's how they make their income. But if there's less people listening to it, there's less advertisers that are willing to pay. And we're seeing a shift in that. So, of course, Spotify, which is now trying to be the largest home for podcasts. They bought The Ringer, they bought Anchor, they bought a lot of original ones. They're kind of saying what's going to happen with that whole space. But that just begs the question. With a lot of people being home and a lot of entertainers who are like out there making money, trying to find ways to maintain that money, and then entertainers who don't make money, trying to make money, I guess, with this and having podcasts and shows and web series right now in the confines of our own house. Is there just too much? Is there just too much content for us to consume? Are there more podcasts than available ears? Now, on the surface, you could say, yeah, because we're all sitting here going like, man, there's a list of things I want to check out. I talked to a friend, and my friend is like, hey, have you heard of the John Smith podcast? Well, episode 2045, he talks about, and I was like, oh my God, I don't care. Just give me your summaries. I'm going to go on my life and not having to waste my time. But on the other hand, it's kind of like, well, people are going to partake and listen to who they want to listen to, right? So if you are Conan O'Brien, for example, and you have a bunch of Conan podcasts, I think Conan fans will partake. So there isn't too much content if you look at it that way. I do think that we look at Netflix, the Netflix model, a bit too much, where you log on to Netflix. And sidebar, of all the Sonic logos in the world, Netflix is the most obtrusive, right? How many times have you sat down after a hard day at work, put your feet up on the couch, adult beverage in hand, and you're like, you know what? I want to watch that show that makes me feel pretty good. Anyway, the thing about Netflix is that there's so many options on one screen. You're just like, I don't know. But the thing is with podcasts though, if you know the lane and the flavors of the podcast you want, you kind of have a more narrowed down focus to what you're actually looking for. So that kind of like goes back. Is there too much, or are we going to see segmentation? Are we going to see fractured content offerings from people? Let's say you're really into Flobito. You love this guy. You listen to all my free podcasts with AfterBuzz. Subscribe to New Amsterdam Radio. You bought a t-shirt from flopita.threadless.com. You're on the patreon.com/Flobo waiting for bonus content. If I tend to have a podcast that goes into, say, my love of corporate governance, which is the brands and subsidiaries a company owns, which I totally am. I think fans of Flopita would be more inclined to try that. But if I think of it as this giant pool and being like, yeah, man, I have a new podcast that talks about how Pepsi owns Quaker Oats, crickets. So it can be overwhelming. So I think for all of us out there, if you want to make sure, if you're a content creator, your idea is you have to double down on your niche, like double down who's your product for and what you're going for. And if you're someone like me who's just out here trying new things, I'm not a binge person, but I binge most stuff here on quarantine. I remember a couple of weeks ago, I had my quarantine playlist of things I've watched so far. That's even getting longer. I might do an update going on. For me, it's like there's no pressure, man. There's no rush. It's very easy to feel overwhelmed by what's offering, but you go what you like, and you're not obligated to finish. You have the right to say, you know what, this lost me. I had this thing like I had these two things. Not about podcasts, but it could probably apply. And one, if something's not good, it's okay to not finish. My ex-girlfriend and I, we watched The Following, the Kevin Bacon series on Fox, and I swear she watched it because she thought I was into it, and I watched it because I thought she was into it. And by after a season and a half, we were like, we're done. And that was the first time that I was like, I'm okay to walk away, because the one time where I finished the show because I thought I was obligated and I was disappointed was Dexter. Dexter was a great show that became a good show, that became a pretty good show, that became a terrible show. And I felt like I got taken for a ride, and not in a good way. So as a consumer, you have the right to pick and choose and say, this episode's great, or I don't need you to tune in. You don't have to subscribe in the way we ask you to subscribe all the time. Now, if you're subscribing to me, that's completely different. Subscribe to everything I offer. But anything else, you can pick one episode there, you can pick one episode there, and you're happy. So yes, I don't really have an answer for you. Is there too many podcasts? It's just too many content creators. There's too much media out there, especially in the wake of the lockdown. But what I can tell you that is, whether you like it or not, there are either going to be self-curation from users, or there's going to be companies whose sole goal is to curate things for you. You log in and they tell you what you like out of life, and they say, hey, here are 10 shows, here are 15 shows that you should listen to. And on the back end, content creators like me are going to have to pay these companies to be placed on these roller directories. I've seen it before in the wedding industry with DJ vendors. It's probably going to happen to everything too, because we're all shifting in that direction. So watch what you like, share what you love. And of course, you can follow me over at Twitter at Flobo Boys, on Instagram at Flobito, and of course Flobito.com. But no, seriously, the Patreon.com/Flobo Boys, bonus content. This week I talked about the time I was on the game show and some photos and videos about that. So if you guys want to check that out, please do. Patreon.com/Flobo Boys. And if you guys have a favorite podcast, put it down in the comments below. I'm always looking to try new things, to give it that 20-minute test. I give every movie, every podcast 20 minutes to keep me hooked. And if not, I drop it. So if you got something you think is worthy, you let me know. But until next time, of course, be yourself and peace out.